They say familiarity breeds contempt. But what about its opposite? What about when the familiar turns alien? When the place you've known your whole life, the face you see every day, suddenly isn't. It's not amnesia, where you forget. It's something far more unsettling. It's jamais vu, a glitch in perception, a terrifying sense that what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, is utterly new, utterly wrong, even when you know logically that it should be familiar. It's the doorknob you've turned 1,000 times, feeling like an alien artifact. The face you've kissed every day, a stranger's. This is the story of Claire and the creeping dread of Jamais Vu, a slow unraveling of reality. Claire lived in Havenwood, a cul-de-sac where the air hummed with a monotonous drone of oscillating sprinklers and distant lawnmowers. Each house, a pastel-colored clone, was a page in her life story. But lately, the pages were blurring, the ink running, the story changing. It started with the oak in Mrs. Henderson's yard. Its gnarled branches, once a playground, now seemed to twist at impossible angles, casting shadows that writhed like living things, like living, oily snakes. The pavement, usually a comforting grey, had a slick sheen, and the pebbles embedded in the concrete looked like they had moved, rearranged. Jamais vu, she thought, the phrase echoing in her mind, a cold, clinical term for the terrifying loss of her anchor. One morning, she brewed her coffee, the ritual a comforting anchor. But as she lifted the mug, the aroma, usually rich and inviting, turned acrid. A burnt caramel tang mingling with a metallic scent that made her stomach churn. The ceramic felt slick, almost repulsive, like it was coated in a thin layer of something she couldn't identify. She poured it down the sink, the gurgling sound echoing unnervingly in the silence. Even the fridge, normally a low, constant hum, was utterly silent, a dead, black void. Her bedroom, her sanctuary, felt like a stage set, a meticulously crafted replica. The posters on her wall, the spines of her favorite books, seemed to mock her with their false familiarity. A framed photo of her childhood cat, Mittens, looked subtly wrong. Mittens' usually bright, playful eyes were now dull and flat, like they had been painted on. The digital clock on her bedside table displayed numbers that writhed and shifted, their shapes alien. Jamais vu, she whispered. The words a desperate attempt to name the creeping terror, to hold on to some semblance of control. The jamais vu wasn't confined to her surroundings. It was seeping into her relationships, distorting the very fabric of her connection to others. Mark, her boyfriend of 3 years, seemed like a stranger wearing a familiar mask. His smile, once warm, now stretched too wide, revealing teeth that seemed slightly sharper. His voice, usually a comforting baritone, had a subtle, off-key resonance, like a recording played at the wrong speed, a warped imitation. One evening, they watched a movie, the flickering light casting dancing shadows on Mark's face. She stared at him, trying to find the man she knew, but his features seemed to shift and distort. His eyes, once warm chocolate, were now cold and hard, like polished stones. His nose, always slightly crooked, was now perfectly straight, unnaturally perfect. "Mark, your face, it's different," she whispered, her voice trembling, her fear a tight knot in her throat. He looked at her, his expression a mask of concern, but his eyes held a cold, predatory gleam. "What are you talking about, Claire? It's me." His words, usually a balm, sent a chill down her spine. The me he spoke of was a lie, a perfect mimicry. Jamais vu, she realized, wasn't just about places. It was about people too, about the very essence of connection. The feeling spread, a contagion of unease. She met her friends, Lisa and Ben, at their usual coffee shop. The familiar banter, the shared jokes, felt hollow, forced. Lisa's bright, cheerful eyes seemed distant, her laugh a brittle imitation. Ben, usually animated and expressive, sat stiffly, his smile fixed and unnatural. Their voices, once so comforting, were now subtly wrong, like they were reading from a script. She tried to share her growing terror, her voice shaking as she described the creeping sense of wrongness. "It's like everything's been replaced, like you're not you anymore," she stammered. Lisa and Ben exchanged a glance, a flicker of something cold and calculating passing between them. "Claire, are you okay? You seem really stressed," Lisa said, her voice laced with a condescending sweetness. Ben nodded, his fixed smile never wavering. "Maybe you should see a doctor. You're imagining things." Their words, meant to reassure, only deepened her fear. They were dismissive, detached, their concern a thinly veiled mask. They don't see it, she thought, her heart pounding. Or they don't want to. She saw quick, fleeting movements out of the corner of her eye. Lisa's face momentarily twisting into something grotesque. Ben's eyes flashing with a predatory gleam. Driven by a desperate need for something, anything real, she drove to her childhood home. It was abandoned now, the garden overgrown, the paint peeling. They moved after Dad's accident, a flicker of a memory that felt distant and distorted. The house was too big, too full of memories. But they never sold it. Her mother couldn't let it go. The familiar scent of the house and old memories should have been comforting, but the Jamais Vu persisted. The house, once a beacon of warmth, felt like a cold, empty tomb, a place where memories had been scraped clean. She found an old photo album, its pages filled with faded images of her past. She flipped through them, searching for a spark of recognition, a connection to the girl she once was. But the faces, her own included, were just images, flat and lifeless. They held no emotional resonance, no warmth. Jamais Vu wasn't just a glitch, it was a void, a place where memories turned to dust, a place where she was losing herself. She sank to her knees, the album falling open on the dusty floor. The world around her was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion, a stage set built by someone who had only a vague understanding of her life. She was trapped in a place where nothing was real, where every familiar thing had been replaced by a sinister imitation. Then, she heard it. A soft scraping, like nails on wood, coming from the hallway. She turned, her heart pounding, the silence amplifying every creak of the old house, every rustle of the overgrown garden. In the shadows of the hallway, a figure stood, its features obscured by the darkness. But its eyes, those cold, hard eyes, were unmistakable. They were the eyes of the imposters, the eyes that had replaced the warmth and familiarity of her world. It stepped into the sliver of light filtering through a broken window. And she saw its face, a distorted reflection of her own, a grotesque mockery of her features. Its smile, a chilling, predatory grin, revealed teeth that were too sharp, too many. "You're finally starting to see," it whispered, its voice a distorted echo of her own, laced with a chilling, mocking tone. "We've been waiting for you to notice. Jamais Vu is a door, Claire, and you've opened it. We are what was always there, behind the mask of your reality." A wave of icy dread washed over her. She recognized the subtle differences in the way the figure moved, the slight twitch of its eye, the almost imperceptible shift of its jaw. This wasn't just a copy. It was a predator wearing her skin, a manifestation of the Jamais Vu itself, a being that fed on the unraveling of reality. "You can't go back now," it said, the words a chilling promise. Claire screamed, a sound swallowed by the empty house. The world had turned against her. The familiar had become the monstrous. And in the heart of the Jamais Vu, she knew there was no escape. The question of why echoed in the silence, unanswered. Was it a punishment, an invasion, or simply the cruel, random unraveling of reality, The ambiguity, the lack of answers, was the final, devastating terror. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't the unknown. It's the familiar, twisted and corrupted, until it becomes a nightmare you can't wake up from. And sometimes, the nightmare is simply knowing you're the only one who sees it. But sometimes, Jamais Vu isn't a glitch, but a gateway, and once opened, it can never be closed.